Hello, welcome to 5 Minute Retro. It's been a good while because I've been busy. That's the story of my life these days as a middle-aged man. Sorry about that. What I've got today is the Game Boy Advance SP, which I think was released in 2003, at least in the UK. So it's 15 years old. I think that's basically a retro device. You may disagree, but anyway, here we are. The reason I've chosen this is it's from my own well, everything's from my own collection, but this is something that I actually bought myself, and it's an original rather than something that I've picked up at a car boot or yard sale over the years. And I've never actually stopped using this device, which I'll come to in just a second. But first of all, it's obviously an update to the Game Boy Advance, which itself was an update to the original Game Boy. The Game Boy Advance added colour. The Game Boy Advance SP, which this is, added this clamshell design and also a backlight, which we'll come to in a second. The backlight is controlled by this button. The design's really lovely. It's a nice, literally pocket-sized design. On the bottom, just while we're looking at that, you can see the little flap there for the battery. You can actually quite easily replace the lithium-ion battery, but this has still got the original in it, and it's been going for 15 years and still holds a fairly decent charge. When new, it would play for about 10 hours without backlight, about 15 to 18 hours without the backlight, although it's basically unplayable without the backlight. These days I get 2 or 3 hours out of it, and actually for what I use it for, as you'll see in a second, that's not really a problem. On the left hand side you've got the volume control here. We'll look at that later, and we've got the on-off switch there. We've also got these shoulder buttons, which are familiar on modern console controllers, and we've got 2 little ports here. We've got the power port, which can also double as a headphone port if you get the adapter, because this doesn't actually have a 3.5mm headphone jack. So if Apple thought they were ahead of the curve, then hey, Nintendo were well ahead of them. And you've got this link port here if you want to link two Game Boys to play head to head with someone else. I don't know how many people really ever did that in real life. If we open it up, you've got the standard D-pad, and you've got the select and start button plus A and B. Again, these are all pretty familiar. And on the bottom you've got the cartridge slot. Now, the Game Boy Advance introduced smaller cartridges than the Game Boy, and at some point I had a fair collection of those, but all I've got left now, which itself is quite retro and has a little interesting retro story, is this Scrabble cartridge. And my wife and I still play this when we go on camping trips and things like that. It's just a nice way to play a little head-to-head Scrabble or a little challenge game that it has. And look, it has a little backup battery, so it stores your progress. And that battery is still going itself. This cartridge is even older than the console. It's, I don't know, maybe 20 years. And the interesting story about this is that one of the programmers was Matthew Smith of Manic Miner fame on the ZX Spectrum and many other computers. But anyway, this is an original Game Boy cartridge, and the cartridge is about twice the size of the ones designed for the Game Boy Advance, and so it doesn't fit properly. Well, it does fit. The Game Boy Advance was always designed to use Game Boy cartridges, but on this particular one it sticks out, so it's really quite awkward. But as I said, this is the only game we play, and it works for me. Well, for us, because I play it with my wife. I've switched it on like so, and you'll hear the little Game Boy ding, and you will see the start screen, and the screen really is pretty dreadful. You can turn the Game Boy lights on and off, the backlight on and off like so, but you know, even with it on, it doesn't make the screen a whole lot better. It's pretty hard to see, although actually in the daylight here it doesn't look too bad. The screen aspect ratio is interesting on the Game Boy Advance. It became a 4:3 ratio, which is less square than the original Game Boy, which is 10:9. And for older games like this Game Boy title, you can press one of the shoulder buttons to expand the screen, like so. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the Game Boy Advance, other than to say there were later versions where the backlight button here actually allowed the intensity level to change from a kind of a normal to a super bright mode. But this is the original Game Boy Advance SP, and it just switches it on and off. And I say again, I don't know why you'd ever use such a feature. But anyway, this is 5 Minute Retro. By definition, I don't waffle on for too long. We're coming up to the 5-minute mark. If you like what I do, please click the subscribe button somewhere here. And to see more of what I've done before, click one of the links down here. Until next time, happy retro.